Oh, that last part was great.
Now everyone thinks they can.
Alright, so one of the biggest fads of the late 90s and early 2000s was skateboarding. This was right around the time when the X Games were starting to become a big deal. And it's when a lot of big names were starting to make, come on the scene. So because of this, a lot of companies wanted to capitalize on the new trend, and one of the most successful ones was definitely Activision. They hired a studio by the name of Neversoft and told them to put together a skateboarding game for them. They also put them in touch with Tony Hawk, who at the time was definitely the most famous skateboarder on the planet, having just made history by being the first skater ever to land the famous 900, which at the time many thought to be impossible. He would endorse the game, but it would also offer a lot of insight to Neversoft in regards to design ideas. And the result is one of the most famous sports franchises in the game industry. So there isn't much of a plot to Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. I mean, as the name implies, you are basically just living the life of a pro skater, skating around, performing tricks, and doing all that fun stuff. There isn't a whole lot to talk about in regards to narrative, but there is quite a bit to talk about in regards to the game's presentation. This is definitely one of the best looking games on the original PlayStation. The character models and animations are fantastic, which is important considering all the complex tricks they have to do. The way the camera dynamically moves also works really well, and the levels are just wonderfully varied. It also has a nice dose of 90 nostalgia in it. Like, you just listen to the soundtrack, you see the locations and everything, and you just get a nice 90 vibe. It's like I'm watching Rocket Power or ESPN's X Games when I was a little kid, so it was a lot of fun to revisit for that. But the big revelation for Tony Hawk's Pro Skater for a lot of people was the gameplay. Now, skateboarding games were not really anything new at the time. There have been several before Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, but the thing about a lot of skateboarding games is that they tended to be racing games, just where you race on a skateboard as opposed to, actually participating in any real skateboard events. And that was actually Neversoft's first instinct when they started making a skateboarding game. Even though Extreme Sports was a big deal at the time, Neversoft themselves didn't have a tremendous deal of knowledge regarding Extreme Sports, particularly skateboarding. So it was definitely beneficial that Tony Hawk would lend his experience, knowledge, and guidance to production, because he would inform the biggest design change that would come to define the Tony Hawk series, and that's that the game isn't about racing, it's about tricks. So basically how a game of Tony Hawk typically works is that you have a map that you can openly skate on, and within a time limit you have to perform as many tricks as possible. And it's pretty easy to do too. Like, you launch off a ramp, you can spin around in the air, you can do grabs, you can kickflip, all kinds of fun stuff. You can grind. Like, it's a very simple but difficult to master game, and that's probably why it did so well when it came out. Like, everyone was into skateboarding at the time, even if they didn't actually skateboard. So now, because the game was so easy to pick up and play, that made it very accessible to a very wide market. People wanted to play Tony Hawk at the time because it was cool. And that design mentality still holds true today, because even though Tony Hawk does feel a little bit stiff, it still is a ton of fun to play even all these years later. And, it would do very well for Activision as well. This was one of the most popular games of its day. As I said, it wasn't just skateboarders who played this game. Everybody played the original Tony Hawk's. They also played its sequel, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, which a lot of people say was a marked improvement over the original game, not just in regards to graphics and a higher degree of polish, but also because the game introduced manualing, which made it a lot easier to chain combos together. So let's say you finish up at a ramp, but there's a nice gap between you and the next one. In the previous game, you would just have to let your combo drop as you made your way to the next one. But here, you can go into a manual and you can extend that combo even further, which had its risk because you still had to balance on the board, and if you screwed up, you would wipe out. But, you know, it made for a more in-depth experience, and again, it was also far more polished and graphically intensive than the previous game was. After that, the Tony Hawk series would, in essence, become a yearly franchise. Like, these games would come out on a regular basis, and it wasn't long before it started to get stale. It might have been just because, the skateboarding fad would eventually pass. And when it did, the Tony Hawk series did try to evolve. I remember Tony Hawk's Underground in particular doing some interesting stuff with its open world, mission-based structure, and the sequel including a healthy dose of Jackass just to mix things up. But unfortunately, after this, the Tony Hawk series just struggled to stay relevant outside of hardcore fans of the series. And unfortunately, it would shoot itself in the foot when it tried to do motion controls, and not just basic motion controls. They actually came out with whacked out peripheral, where you would actually have to play with the board on the floor as if you were actually riding a skateboard, which probably sounded cool to little kids, but anyone who looked at that thing knew it wasn't going to work too well, and it really didn't. Tony Hawk Ride and Tony Hawk Shred, I think it was called, were universally panned by critics, and they probably didn't do too well, primarily because the control made the game even more expensive, so it was probably a hard sell for most people. The Tony Hawk series would disappear for a while as other skating franchises sort of stole its thunder, but the series has started to come back with a remaster of Tony Hawk's Pro Skaters 1 and 2, and now we have Pro Skaters 3 and 4 on the way here soon. It actually looks really good, and they've got some fun bonus contents like the Doomslayer appearing, which is a lot of fun. I remember back in the day, characters like Spider-Man and Darth Maul would appear in the original Tony Hawk, so it's cool that they're doing that again. And you know what? I have played the remaster of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2, and it is a pretty polished game. It's nice to see that these games are still around, even if they don't have the same audience that they once had. So, yeah, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, definitely not the gaming juggernaut that it once was, but it is still one of the iconic games of the PlayStation and one of the iconic games of the 32-bit era in general. But that's going to do it for Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, guys. Join me tomorrow as we take a look at the next game in the PlayStation Retrospective. I'll see you guys then.